Hey BookTube, we're gonna do this again because Zoe crashed the video. She video bombed me. Sorry, my computer's asking me to do stuff. So I had a question. This is just like a discussion video, and there's a few people that I think would have a lot of good stuff to say about this, but I'm not going to call them out. But I had a question on one of my older videos that was, are hard case crime books considered pulp? And there's two answers to that. One is yeah, and one is no. Boy, that was a awfully weird way to say that, but but there's merit on both sides of that coin. Um, Most of the hard case crime books, at least the ones I have, which are probably not even a third of the published books that they have. Like even the older ones, I don't think any of them date before 1950 or 19, like the mid 40s maybe. So the chances of any of them actually being first published in a pulp magazine are pretty slim. So the fact that they never came out as a pulp, or even if you want to get really technical on pulp paper, they technically wouldn't be considered pulp. But because of the style that they're written in, and some of the authors who wrote these actually did write in pulps, there can be a case for stylistically, but at the same time, at the same time, the paperbacks, kind of as we know them, I think in America, the first paperback publisher that had the market mindset and the distribution mindset that made paperbacks and paperback originals different from first run hardcover books. I think that would be pocketbooks. But the first like paperback original company was Fawcett with the gold medal line, and there was probably, I want to say something like 5 to maybe even closer to 10 years between pocketbooks making inexpensive paperbacks of popular titles, and Fawcett basically opening up the floodgates and giving every writer a shot to have their stuff published. And there were a lot of companies that did this. So you had Fawcett, and you had Pocketbooks, and you had Avon, and you had Dell, and you had oh my gosh, how come? Oh, Signet. There were a lot of companies who were doing it, and companies varied with how their artwork was going to depict the content, or at least sell the content. And I should say too that before paperbacks came out like this and were distributed and marketed like this, the only place that you could really go and buy a book would be a bookstore. Um, and that was basically it. And not every town had a bookstore. But the thing that changed drastically, and the thing that's weird, is that Pocketbooks and Penguin were doing this at roughly the exact same time. And but Penguin being in the UK, and I think when Penguin, because Penguin did have an American branch for a short while, and then they pulled out, and that turned into New American Library, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so this was the first time that you could get books at um, like a grocery store or a gas station or a drugstore or uh, a bus station or a train station or um, like any random place that you could think of that somebody could put a spinner rack, like any shop, any retail space. Um, and then another thing that might um, kind of lean into the pulps is that newsstands were also a big place to sell these. So you would have your slicks and your magazines and your newspapers and all this other stuff, and then you would also have your paperbacks. So the distribution for those and those channels, I believe, for a lot of the companies were the same as magazines and comic books. So because of that, um, the tendency to, and again, we're like barely 10 years away from, or no, I don't even think it was that long. If we're talking about the early 30s, like we're like going right along with the pulps. So you have the pulp mentality with covers. And that's really the biggest thing um, that changes your novel. I don't even know what you would call them, but um, your genre fiction from literary fiction, basically, because um, you would have all of these pulps where they would have like topless chicks like tying other chicks down with an alien or a skeleton with a knife or a gun coming up right behind them, followed by a giant fucking octopus and a spaceship. Okay, so you have all of that crazy, titillating artwork. Um, so having your paperbacks being sold next to that, you would have to kind of compete for that dime to a quarter. um, so, like, I would be surprised if there wasn't, like, I don't know, Moby Dick in a bikini or something like that. Like, just some random half naked girl with some violence involved. Um, because that's what a lot that was what was selling the a lot of the slicks and the pulps. So having that same kind of stuff be on your cover for your paperbacks was a big deal to be able to compete with the other trash that was being sold. And that's where a lot of people kind of brought the hammer down, saying that, like, um, those uh, trashy newsstand paperbacks or those drugstore paperbacks are filth, and there would be like something like a big classic, let's say. How come I can't? Let's just say like Romeo and Juliet would be like right next to. Let me see here. Uh, what's a good one I could throw out? Let's say Branded Woman. Okay, and they would have basically the same cover, um, like the same ideas on the covers. So, in that sense, the question would be, so is like Shakespeare and the Bronte sisters and Sherlock Holmes pulp, because if they're being hustled the same way those were. And now I'm getting just like a million miles away from the original question, probably. But what I'm getting at is, and then the other thing is, like with hard case crime books in particular, they are a specific genre type. So they're like um, they're basically detective fiction for the most part, and some crime fiction. But with the pulps, I mean, you had like science fiction, you had westerns, you had action adventure, you had your detectives and your mysteries and all that other stuff. You had war stories. There were just so many different kinds of pulps that to just say like hard case crime books or pulp is such a large genre defining thing, but it's not a genre. That's the whole thing. But it is really like strange to talk about and to nitpick. I saw the question today, and I have been just like all day, like going, well, da, 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 and then I'd go, oh, da, 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 and then I'd go, let me look this up and let me read some of this. And so I've been going all over the place. So I don't know exactly what the answer is. I feel like I'm still at the place like they are pulpy, um, but they're not pulps, but they could be pulps. So what do you think? Do you think pulp is a genre? Do you think it is just the type of stories that were printed on pulp paper, put out in pulp magazines? Um, where is the line drawn? Because at the end of the day, you could say any genre fiction is pulpy or exploitive to some extent. And that might be the safest answer in retrospect, but it's not the funnest answer. So I would love to hear what you think. And I'll call Steve Donahue out. I'll call Richardson Reeds out. Um, and then there's a couple other guys who I would love to hear what they think about this. Because, like, for instance, if you're reading like if you're reading like 80s horror, like is that pulp? Because that's kind of what that would be back in the day, or where it would have gotten published, you know. Um, but yeah, gosh, this is so much of a talking point. I feel like I could just ramble on, but it's already tomorrow and it's late, and I feel like I'll just waffle. So let me know what you think down below. I would love to pick brains on this. So I'll talk to you in the thingies.